Love is, the way we experience love, it is the absence of separation or the absence of otherness. When we feel we love someone, the distance or the separation between us collapses. That's what love is, the absence of the sense of separation. In other words, it is the sharing of our being, the absence of otherness. Pure consciousness knows nothing of duality or otherness. So love is another name for consciousness. Now when consciousness wants to manifest its infinite potential, it cannot do so directly. It has to collapse into a finite mind. In other words, separation is the price consciousness pays for manifestation. And that is why we, as finite minds, long for one thing above all else: love. If you ask anyone on their deathbed, almost anyone, what is the most important experience in your life? Nearly everyone will say love. Because we understand, we as finite minds understand that love is the highest experience there is. Can anybody imagine an experience higher than love? No, we all know that love is the height of experience. So from the perspective of the finite mind, we know apparent separation, apparent otherness, but the one thing the finite mind wants above all else is to be divested of the sense of separation. That's why we love friendship. It's why we love intimate relationship, because in friendship and intimate relationship, the sense of separation, to a greater or lesser extent, dissolves, and reality, pure consciousness, or in this case love, shines. It's not that love is an attribute of consciousness. Love is another name for consciousness. Love, that means the absence of otherness, the absence of two. At the level of the finite mind, we consider love to be a relationship. We consider love to be a feeling that takes place between two people. Love is not a relationship. Love is the dissolution of relationship. It is the collapse of relationship. It is not possible to love another person. In the experience of love, the self and the other dissolve. That's why Rumi said this beautiful thing. He said, true lovers never really meet one another. They are in each other all along. Love is not a meeting of two people. It is the dissolution of the apparent separation between self and other, and the revelation of the prior unity of these two apparently separate selves. So love is not an experience that a separate self has. It is the dissolution of the self, the sense of the separate self, the revelation of reality, the revelation of consciousness. Consciousness is love. And that is why the separate self, which is of course made of pure consciousness, there is this recognition. So love is the trace that infinite consciousness leaves of itself in the finite mind. And the mind, although everything it knows is limited, it recognizes that the experience of love is something that is beyond itself. The finite mind recognizes that love, the experience of love, is like a divine intervention in its life. That is why we value love above all else.
Is that the longing?
The experience of longing is love veiled. So there is only consciousness. There is only love. When that consciousness, for the sake of manifestation, limits itself in the form of each of our minds, it veils its own nature from itself. And therefore love seems to be absent. This absence of love is felt from the perspective of the separate self as the longing for the beloved. So this longing, this sense of lack, this longing is inevitable for the separate self. It is the core feeling that all separate selves, the wound in the heart of all separate selves, this feeling, this intuition of love, but this feeling that I am cut off. I need to be completed. I need to be divested of the sense of separation. It's why we go, the only reason we go towards objects and substances is to briefly merge with the other. In that merging, the self and the other collapse. Even if the object is just something insignificant, like chocolate. Just a insignificant, there's this little craving, you visualize the chocolate, you think the chocolate is going to relieve the sense of longing, and sure enough, the first taste of chocolate, it does bring your longing to an end. In that moment, you and the chocolate merge. In other words, your sense of separation dissolves, and your true nature shines. That is the experience of enjoyment that we were talking about earlier. You're enjoying not the taste of chocolate, it's the taste of your true nature that you are enjoying. It's the same with friendship. The reason why we want to merge with another is not because we want to merge with another person or another body. It's because we long, the separate self longs above all else to be divested of its separation, and as a result to stand revealed in its original form, its prior unlimited form, which is love itself. All desires are the desires for God. All desires. Whatever the apparent object of our desire is, the only reason we want that object. Would any of us here desire an intimate relationship if we were convinced that that relationship would bring us misery? All desires are ultimately the desires for God. They are the desires to be divested of the sense of limitation, and to be not returned to, because we are already that, but divested of the sense of separation, enabling our essential being to shine as it is, unlimited. All desires are a desire for that. So yes, your intuition that your longing is divine is absolutely right. It is divine, and in fact, from the perspective of the separate self, the separate self feels that I long for happiness, or I long for the divine, because the separate self believes that it is a separate, independently existing self. The separate self feels I am going towards happiness, towards God, towards the divine. But remember, all there is to the separate self is an apparent limitation. So in fact, our longing is not the separate self going towards happiness. It is the divine calling us back to itself. Having contracted itself into a finite mind, that infinite consciousness just wants to go back to its natural state. That impulse in consciousness to go back to its natural state of expansion is felt from the level of the finite mind as the desire for happiness or the longing for God. It's not really the separate self that desires happiness or longs for God. There is no separate self to long for God or to desire for happiness. There is just consciousness with its nature of love and unconditional joy and imperturbable peace that contracts itself. And as a result of this contraction, there is this natural impulse in it to go back to its state of equilibrium. That impulse in consciousness to go back to its natural state is felt from the point of view of the individual as the desire for happiness.